For 7 generations, Brickendon in Tasmania has been home to the Archer family. Today, 3 generations still live here, under the one roof. And that's how it's been for nearly 200 years.
There's nothing out there that I can see that anyone else has done. And everything I look at has been done by my family. And really, when I look across the river to Woolmers, it's the same landscape that's been there for 180 years.
Woolmers on the other side of the valley belonged to another branch of the Archer family, the ancestral home where the dynasty began. But today, Woolmers is lost to family forever, the last in line, living in isolation and dying alone.
It's always amazed me how Woolmers has gone to the wall, to think that could happen.
This is the story of a great colonial family and the sacrifices they've made to hold on to their inheritance.
For Brickendon to go out of family hands, Richard would be officially cut off at the knees. He would be devastated by it.
In 1813, when Thomas Archer, a miller's son from England, first took sight of Tasmania's fertile Norfolk plains, it took his breath away. Prime Aboriginal hunting grounds, and now the colonial government was just giving it away. Thomas had one thought, and one thought only.
This is my chance in life. The government wanted settlers, they wanted responsible people, they wanted income, they wanted produce, and this is too good an opportunity to miss.
Thomas Archer chose the pick of the plains to build his home. By the mid-19th century, he'd created an estate to match his ambition. Sumptuous Woolmers crowned 13,000 acres, complete with crested china and furnishings from the continent.
He was a gentleman of some note in the colony by that time. He entertained governors, and the fact that he was elected to Parliament, you probably would have considered him as Tasmanian aristocracy.
Thomas Archer shared his land and good fortune with his father and brothers. Soon they were one of the largest landholders in the colony. Like all free settlers, their wealth was raised on the back of convict labour. And with convicts making up 90% of the colony, the Archer family had a ready supply.
The convicts in Tasmania were virtually essential to anyone trying to establish an estate. There was just no way you could have done it yourself or had the money to employ people to do it.
On the other side of the river, in clear view of Woolmers, Thomas Archer's eldest brother William established his estate, Brickendon. But William Archer had much humbler ambitions than his brother. He simply wanted to farm, and farm well.
He obviously had to learn from farming virtually from scratch, and so you'd buy all the basic books and make sure you learned as much as possible. William decided to clear all his land virtually completely, plant hedgerows, drain it, build large buildings for storage.
Really, Brickendon became a mini England. The little cottage that he lived in was a very humble little cottage when he first arrived here. He obviously developed his farm beautifully, and it was regarded as a model farm of the day.
180 years later, the little England William Archer created still prevails within the hedgerows of Brickendon. kept alive by his direct descendants.
Something else here, Dad. Look here.
What
It's a farm diary. It's 1829. It's got the daily...
Today, Richard Archer and his father Kerry are still discovering their ancestor William's life.
William seemed quite content to be in his place in the community. He was comfortable, he had a nice farm, and he really wanted his children to be happy, but he wasn't into creating his own empire, I don't think.
Across the valley at Woolmers, William's brother Thomas saw his estate as the seat of a much grander dynasty. But the unexpected death of his son Thomas II left only a young grandson to inherit the mantle. The connection between family and farm was lost.
The third Thomas would have grown up as probably almost a city boy, gone out to Woolmers and heard about what his grandfather did and seen all this wealth, and hadn't really thought about doing any practical work himself.
So Thomas III chose to live elsewhere, and the Archers of Woolmers became absentee landlords.
They didn't have to work. They leased the land and they got money for the leasing of the land. They were able to sail the world and play golf and cricket and tennis, whatever they wished to do, and they used this as their weekender.
Like their Woolmer cousins, the Brickendon Archers also travelled abroad, but to study, and they always returned home. Kerry Archer never had the chance to leave. He was a brilliant student planning to study engineering, but his father was ailing and he had no choice but to manage the farm. He was only 17.
I feel sad for him that he wasn't able to choose, as other generations since have been able to choose, that it was dictated to him basically what his life was going to be.
It was Kerry's mother Phyllis who controlled her young son's destiny at Brickendon. When Kerry's father died, Phyllis was left complete authority over the estate.
I think Phyllis would have been fairly tough right from day one, and when he died, would have steeled her resolve to make sure that the property stayed strong, and at the time of my grandfather's death that she was going to run the show herself, which she basically did in a way.
Phyllis recognised that Brickendon's survival as a family estate depended on her teenage son.
She realised that I was the only alternative for Brickendon, because if I wasn't interested in Brickendon, there wasn't a future for Brickendon. I always had this feeling that I was under her thumb up to a point.
Maybe if my grandmother hadn't been there, the property would have not been a family now.
Across the valley at Woolmers, a very different family drama was playing out, but with an equally dominant leading lady in charge. In 1934, Thomas V, his wife Marjorie and their son young Tom moved into the big house on the hill. Marjorie would prove to be as potent a force at Woolmers as Phyllis was at Brickendon, but for very different reasons.
She was called the Duchess. You just felt that she had a feeling she had a viceregal position over at Woolmers.
She was very much like dressing in pink. She wanted to be very much the lady of the town. She was very possessive of her son, young Tom.
Marjorie doted on her young Tom. He was the centre of his mother's world. And when young Tom left for boarding school, it was too much for Marjorie.
I've been told that when young Tom was a boy and he had to go off to school in the morning, she'd collapse into tears when he went off. This gives an indication she didn't like to lose him.
Young Tom was only at school for a short time when a chest complaint saw him return home to his mother's care.
You might say that she mollycoddled him, might be the word, and he wasn't allowed to mix with people of his own age.
Young Tom grew up closeted behind the walled estate of Woolmers. Unlike Phyllis at Brickendon, Marjorie never encouraged young Tom to understand the practical needs of the family estate. He was simply Thomas Archer VI. Through the years, Tom's only contact with the outside world was from a car window. The two Archer families, living within sight of each other, never crossed paths.
The only time I ever saw them was when they drove through in their car, and old Tom was sitting up the front with his hat on, and Marjorie and young Tom were sitting in the back seat. And Marjorie, she'd have white gloves on and she'd give a white glove wave as she went past, and I'd give a wave back.
The first time Kerry Archer crossed the threshold of Woolmers was after his engagement in 1956. Marjorie invited the young couple for tea.
And the door was opened about this far, and there was this lady standing there with a lantern and a shawl round her shoulders. This was Mrs. Archer. I didn't quite know where I was going, and then we went into the main sitting room.
There was no sign of young Tom. He was kept in the back room. In fact, I've always wondered that she kept him there because she thought it might give him ideas of why didn't he have this opportunity.
Unlike his cousin, Kerry did have the opportunity to marry. After the wedding, he brought his young bride, Angela, home to Brickendon. She moved in with her mother-in-law, Phyllis.
We converted the house and made this southern wing into a place for us. That's a bit big for Kerry, that one. It hasn't always been easy. I mean, I think we've all probably learnt to hold our tongue sometimes, but that's probably good for us.
In time, Phyllis welcomed the arrival of her 3 grandchildren to Brickendon.
She was very warm, and she had a quick wit, a wicked wit, but she was a very good grandmother.
Her adoring grandchildren knew her only as Babby, and Phyllis remained firmly in charge.
I think it was probably hell at times, in a way, because Babby was able to watch everything that we did, had an eye into, I suppose, our lives, and Mum just had to keep the peace.
Phyllis made sure this new generation of Archers respected Brickendon's heritage, particularly Richard.
As a child, I virtually lived with my grandmother on a daily basis. All around there were Archer things, paintings, portraits, and I obviously subconsciously took that in. I started getting asked questions like, now, what are you going to do when you grow up? And espousing the virtues of my ancestors.
Babby was the one that made the point that things were for Richard, and Richard was to continue things. And in some ways, Dad was just the custodian to keep it all ticking along.
Phyllis maintained her powerful presence at Brickendon until the age of 81. Then, to the family's surprise, she announced she was moving into town. Richard, now 24, had completed agricultural college and was keen to take over from his father, just as Phyllis had hoped.
She perhaps would have thought, now, what's Richard going to do? And I'm sure basically she moved out for me.
I always hoped she'd move out. When the time came, I suppose you could say we were relieved when she'd moved out, because it did give us a sense of freedom almost.
Well, just think about it. I'd rather you did Sparry's Hoop and got rid of all that dead wood out of there. You know what everyone will say? Here she is being bossy again. Won't they?
They wouldn't be far wrong.
Across the river at Woolmers, Marjorie Archer never left the estate until her death. Soon after, her husband died, and young Tom, now in his 50s, was all alone.
He'd had this lifetime of non-associating, and he was virtually living there as a hermit, and I felt a bit sorry for him.
He spent a lot of time alone in a room. Maybe his bedroom tinkering with his toys, maybe in the drawing room, maybe in the dining room. That's my impression of him.
He never ever married, so it meant that this line was virtually dying or died out.
But over at Brickendon, continuity was guaranteed when Richard Archer married Louise Oldmeadow.
Everything just clicked. I could tell she would live in the country and she would appreciate being on a farm. She loved animals, so I thought that, yeah, she would enjoy it here.
Get some washing dry, hopefully. With this weather coming through, it's going to be raining, I think.
After their marriage, Louise, just like Archer brides before her, moved into Brickendon. And Richard simply moved from one side of the house to the other.
This morning. Beautiful boy. Each wife that's come onto the property has had very different attributes to them, but understand that the future of the farm is probably the most, or the future of the family is the most important thing that we need to consider.
Kerry Archer appreciated his 3 decades as Brickendon's custodian, but was happy to hand the reins over to Richard.
How much you got to do up there?
I've got to put 3 or 4 nails in.
Have you studied up there how well I constructed it? The mechanism I put in to ring the bell.
Yeah, well, for 40 years ago, I suppose the engineering was all right. Someone go and ring the bell, please.
This unique convict village was crumbling and in danger of disappearing, until Richard's wife, Louise, came up with a solution. Restore Brickendon and open it up for tourism.
Okay, all right.
By opening up to the public, it meant that we were able to justify looking after the buildings. What we've done, we feel as if we've at least stopped the rot at this point, and it will at least be there for the next generations as well.
The Brickendon Archers have held tightly to their precious heirloom, the farm and its rich colonial history. But there is another family also bound up in Brickendon's past.
Hello, Richard.
Arch, nice to meet you.
Yeah, lovely to meet
First
you.
time.
91-year-old Arch Flanagan calls this place sacred soil. His convict ancestor Tom lived and laboured here.
Come look at the buildings anyway.
Yes, good.
I find them fascinating.
Dad's never been to Brickendon before. He's long thought about his convict forebears and about their suffering, their exile, and about the immense human cost of it all.
Arch Flanagan's son, the writer Richard Flanagan, has brought his father to Brickendon. Today, the descendants of servant and master meet.
Would you like to go in through this cottage then first?
Yes. I couldn't stop thinking about Thomas Flanagan, what he thought of it when he walked into this situation 150 years ago. He would have plenty of food, which he hadn't had back in Ireland. And he would also be very lonely because he wasn't only separated from his family, he was separated from all his roots out here.
because they only built what they had to have.
This island was the gulag of the British Empire, and it was a hell when you were cast into it, sometimes through sheer bad luck. Some, like Thomas Flanagan here, merely had stolen food for his family.
More than 150 years later, the Flanagans are grateful for a simple act of kindness. Back in 1849, William Archer wrote to the authorities seeking permission for Tom Flanagan's wife and children to join him. And so the Flanagan family was established in Tasmania.
What is remarkable about a family like the Archers of Brickendon, they managed to assert some decency. They weren't so obsessed about their place or about their wealth, and ultimately the land and the past laid claims on them.
By contrast, the Archers over at Woolmers would lose everything. In May 1994, Thomas Archer VI, the last in the line, died. 2 centuries of Woolmers history was frozen in time.
It was the most extraordinary experience of being able to take out a fur stole that probably had been worn by somebody 60 years ago and hadn't been touched since. Yeah, quite extraordinary. It was like walking into somebody's life.
Now this is young Tom's bedroom. Now the reason he was called young Tom was he was Thomas VI, as I've explained to you, because we called his father Old Tom.
Today, Woolmers is a museum run by a public trust. Young Tom's reclusive life is now on show for all.
Come on everyone, we'll go across the drawing room now.
Sadly, that lifestyle that young Tom had is the reason why Australia has that time capsule. And he virtually sacrificed his life for that.
But at Brickendon, new life flourishes. Louise and Richard's daughter, Maddie, is just down the corridor from her grandparents. And Angela, in true Brickendon fashion, wouldn't have it any other way.
Kerry sometimes says he thinks I'm more attached to the place than he is. So somehow it does get you in. I don't know whether it's the history. It's just a nice place to be.
But will Brickendon's charm continue to outweigh its burden to this next generation? Will any of Louise and Richard's 3 children want to stay here?
Mum, where do you want me to put this hay?
Put a bale down here for the horses, and just the rest of it can go in the shed at the end of the blacksmith shop, if you like.
I know with the tourists, for example, everyone asks the question, have you got a son? Is he going to be a farmer? And I tell them quite bluntly, look, he can do whatever he likes. I want to pass it on simply because I am able to do that, and I want to do it. He mightn't want to accept it.
Like most teenage boys, William's heritage is more about his name than his past.
Don't you just about do it?
Did you have the right rod in, do you think, for the job?
Probably get bagged a bit. I don't know, just 7 generations, and like at school, people call me William Archer the 7th and stuff like that, but it doesn't really worry me.
You'll have to adjust your rods.
And at 16, Will's dreams for his future are still forming.
Turn the voltage down a bit, but I'd like to come back on the farm and just try it out for myself, but Mum and Dad don't really want me to. They want me to try something different. So they want me to go away and be an engineer or whatever. But I don't know, I'd just like to come back onto the farm, I reckon.
He's like me at 16. It's just a great place to be for a boy. Yeah.
Last night, I tackled Brooksy. I tackled him and my leg got stuck.
As modern parents, Richard and Louise know what's best for their children may not be best for Brickendon.
It's going to get harder and harder to keep it in the family. Farming's changing. It's something I don't like to think about, because I really can't imagine living here in Tasmania and not being at Brickendon. It would be very tough.
We'll just put the eggs in, Maddie, and you can beat it up again. Whoops.
I hope the fence isn't on. No, it's not. Given myself an electric shock enough times.
Steady. Push up. Hey, come on, get up.